Okay, good to see so many people on. I almost said so mange. I just did a Danish event, so I almost, BB's giggling.
I can translate, Carla.
Yeah, you could be the interpreter as I go on here. Yeah. Okay. Exciting. Okay, we will get started here. We are excited about today. Let me just start the recording as we get going.
Recording in progress.
Here we go. Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our Saturday team Zoom. It's good to see everybody. I see people smiling from actually so many different places, but today is really exciting. It's fun every Saturday, either learning from some of the team members about how to build Zinzino. Oh, that's right, I do need to mute. Try that again. Okay, I am going to make sure that everybody's muted. You are welcome to put comments down in the comments section if you're streaming in, or if you're watching on Zoom, do put some comments in down there. It's all welcome. So welcome to our Saturday team Zoom, and it's fun every Saturday because sometimes we hear like how to build the business, sometimes we hear about our products, sometimes we have something on personal development or setting a plan. There's always something to be learning. But I had many people start writing to me and saying, well, we would like to hear maybe this topic, or we would like to hear maybe this topic. And seriously, it's just so exciting every time we have this guest speaker on because of his knowledge on every one of our products. And so since there were so many who were asking about losing weight and they were asking about gut health, we actually came up with a theme for today about trusting or listening to your gut. And it's kind of the subtopic: losing weight, improving your microbiome, reduce inflammation, and live longer. And he says a hint, it's all connected. So let's hear from the fantastic and legendary, our Dr. Paul Clayton. So Dr. Paul, I'd like to have you come on and just tell us a little bit about how you came up with this exact topic. I'm going to have you, there you go, unmuted. Super.
Because you asked me to, Carl.
You're right, Dr. Paul. Okay, so, but we did add, and you were helping out with that, but you said when you came up with this, because we talked about losing weight.
There really are. And this whole area of microbiome or microbiota-centered research is just taking off in every direction. And we know now that it's involved in multiple sclerosis, where the microbiome can be protective or damaging. We know that it's involved in the spectrum disorders. What we're now finding out is that it also seems to be involved in autoimmunity, in non-alcohol related fatty liver disease, in your ability to resist infection. It's so important. In fact, the microbiome, which has been routinely compared in terms of its complexity and its importance with other vital organs such as the liver, the kidney, or the heart, is expanding into that role. It is clearly a vital organ, absolutely vital in its own right, and it determines our health and prospects almost from conception. And it plays a very keen role, an important role in determining our health expectancy and life expectancy.
So we hear I think most of us have heard, it's a gut-brain connection, and they call it actually like your second brain. Somehow that gut plays a role in everything. And you're saying that it's playing a part in, your health, or if you're not healthy, it's playing in almost everything?
Well, Hippocrates, or rather the group of physicians who were kind of became known as Hippocrates, and he probably is more than just one person, allegedly said that the origins of all illness can be found in the gut and in your diet. I don't think that's not true. I mean, that would be overly simplistic, but clearly it is one of the absolutely vital elements in our health prospects and life expectancy, and it has been very sadly neglected. And the reason for that is that we're not feeding it properly. We're not giving it the nutrition it needs. The real problems start about after the Second World War. So from the 50s and after that and up until now. And what has happened is that in developing nations, we've seen a progressive introduction of ultra-processed foods, which now account for actually well over half of all the calories that we eat in North America, in Britain, in increasing parts of Europe. And they're becoming increasingly important in the developing countries as well. And one of the problems that spin off from that is we've seen a huge increase in all the chronic degenerative diseases. But we've also, and very specifically, seen a huge increase in IBS and IBD. So irritable bowel syndrome, and then Crohn's and ulcerative colitis and colorectal cancer and liver cancer and all the things that spin off from that. And they are very clearly, directly affected by the microbiome, and that is very clearly affected by what you put in your stomach, in your mouth, what you put into your supermarket shopping trolley. I think you don't call them trolleys in the North America, do you? What do you call them? Baskets?
Oh, and the shopping carts, yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
shopping
so
carts.
you're
shopping carts.
Yeah. So you're saying this, I mean, it is, there's so much talk about this microbiome. And I know that there's people out there who maybe are health professionals who have heard all of this. And some of us that have heard some of it, and you know, how important it really is to tie all this together. But is this knowledge that they know or they're studying in regards to how important the microbiome is, or is it stuff that, you know, they've known for sure and it's just expanding?
I think that clinical researchers working with the microbiome you don't need to convince them how important it is. Frontline doctors really don't know very much about it because they're simply not taught very much about nutrition at their medical schools. Their post-qualification training doesn't really cover nutrition or diet or things like that either. They're basically a pill for all ills kind of people, most of them. I mean, I don't mean to disregard those relatively few medical professionals who have come to understand that nutrition is important and then start to study it very often in their spare time. But the medical schools don't promote this. And so the bulk of the medical profession is really behind the times. Some of them are beginning to catch on to the importance of probiotics, and they think, well, maybe we should give probiotics after we've treated a patient with an antibiotic, or maybe after certain types of surgery. And that's about as far as most of them go. In the background, in the clinical science centers, for example, at the University of Cork, where a lot of this work is being done, and at the University of Louvain in Belgium, which is another hotbed of research in this area, the work that's coming out of those places is stunning. It's mind-boggling. And what it's showing us is that if we can get the microbiome right, by giving it the right fuel, at that point, it stops being damaging to us. And it starts to support us. It starts to support cardiovascular health, immune health, brain health, and a host of other things besides. We have to, I think, find a way of going back to the garden. Getting back to the garden, which is the title of one of my most recent blog posts. And what has happened by leaving that garden, and I'm using this term in a very metaphorical way, we've become drastically depleted in these very specific nutrients called prebiotic fibers, which we don't use directly, but they are the fuel that we need to give the microbiome in order to cajole it into a kind of a healthy configuration, which is where it should be, as opposed to the profoundly unhealthy configuration that most people now experience. And that is contributing so much to our really terrible public health.
So the microbiome is that important that we need to, you know, and how we are since the 50s, you're saying that we need to do something about it, because that's, I mean, I've said this sentence many times, is we know more about health than we've ever known before, and yet we've never been sicker, and it just doesn't, you know, tie together very well. What is it that we're not getting? And you're saying that this microbiome, which they know so much about, is that important. So and it's changed. The reason that it's so out of whack, if I can pull it down to my terms, is because of the food that we're eating and what we're putting in our bodies?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, I think I probably want to go back to where you started. We know so much more about health than ever before, and yet we're sicker than ever before. I would argue that actually we don't know very much more about health than we used to. In fact, I would say that the doctors of 3 or 4 generations ago knew more about how to help people to stay healthy than doctors do today. And the reason for that is that back in the 20s and 30s, the medical profession was hijacked by the sociopath John Rockefeller and herded down the Gadarene slope towards pharmaceutical synthetic pharmacology. Now, that has been a very interesting journey. We've learned a great deal about how drugs work. We've learned a great deal about how to kill people in new and interesting ways that we've never seen before through the adverse effects of these drugs. And we have learned to manage more or less effectively the symptoms of many chronic degenerative diseases that have only become prevalent because we have forgotten the nutritional wisdom of our great-grandparents. So we've learned a great deal about the way in which the body goes wrong, but the medical profession willfully does not look at the causes of these health problems in the first case, which in about 8 or 9 cases out of 10, you can trace directly back to the diet. So yes, the clinical scientists are working in that specific area, but they are greatly outgunned in terms of spending and marketing and regulators by the pharmaceutical industry, who have enormous amounts of money, so much money that they have been able to corrupt the regulatory authorities, such as the FDA, which is deeply compromised. They have been able to publish completely dishonest results in even the most august medical journals. They have been able to brainwash and thoroughly warp the thinking of an entire generation of medical specialists. So,
and Dr. Paul, just to say, we have, I mean, to be honest, I kind of maybe have thought different things about doctors, but you know, as you know, my mother personally is terminally ill, and I have met some of the most amazing doctors who are doing the most amazing things, and they're just really wanting to get healthy and helping their patients get healthy. So I know that, you know, there's a lot of people out there that say, we just, you know, we really want to know the most information on getting healthy. There's a lot of doctors that want to do the same thing. So
I agree.
we're going to talk about the science of getting healthy, right?
But I'm not talking about their motivation. Their hearts are in the wrong place, but their heads are in the wrong place. I won't describe anatomically where I think their heads are. I think I'll leave that to your imagination. There are shortcuts to becoming healthy. And if you follow these shortcuts, the odds are that you will never need the more or less tender administrations of those medical specialists. And that's where you want to be. You don't ever want to see a doctor, ideally.
No, that's a good point. If you were healthy, you wouldn't be in seeing a doctor. So let's talk about what the science is saying in regards to you know, getting healthy, and what can people do in regards to the microbiome. And maybe saying this, I know you're going to have terms that is going to be doctor terms, but also for somebody who's not a medical professional as myself, but trying to explain what is it that needs to be done to correct this and help this microbiome flourish, because it sounds like if your microbiome's happy, it used to say, you know, if the wife is happy, everybody happy, or you happy wife, happy life. But here in your body, it's if your microbiome is happy, your body's happy. Something like that.
Well, it's certainly going to be an enormously positive factor. There are still other things that can go wrong. The gut is not everything, but it is important. And as I said, we've been starving of this very specific types of fuel that it needs in order to function optimally. And what we're trying to do, not just in Zinzino, but in many research centers in other parts of the world, we're looking to see what happens if you restore those very specific nutrients back into the diet. Now, what I think we've already seen in our own small Zinzino world is all kinds of wonderful things start to happen. In the wider world of research, I can, and if anyone who's interested, go to Google Scholar or PubMed or some of the other very well-known medical databases and just type in prebiotic, and you will see thousands of research publications just tumbling out one after another. There's a lot of research there for you, and I think that for the non-specialist, it's a bit overwhelming. I find it quite overwhelming, and I know most of the basic language, but there is so much of it now. So you've got this huge buildup of information, which I think is utterly convincing now, and it culminated in a wonderful paper a couple of years ago, which was a meta-analysis, a study of studies. And the people who were doing this study are people I really have a lot of respect for. And they came to the conclusion that if you don't have enough of these fibers in your diet, it increases the risk of early death, which means premature or preventable death, by about a third, by 30%. Huge, huge, huge. And they said, well, if you don't have enough of these fibers in your diet, you increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes and bowel cancer and liver cancer and breast cancer and a whole lot of other things. And since then, other people have begun to work out how exactly these fibers do protect you. So my feeling is, I think everybody knows the importance of balance oil in damping chronic inflammatory stress in the body. I would say the xenobiotic is at least as important. It's only acting locally in the gut, but by reducing chronic inflammatory stress in the bowel, that actually has a huge knock-on effect, not just in the gastrointestinal system, but in every other system as well. So it complements balance oil, if you like. It's in fact one of the other legs of the health protocol.
Okay, so like getting your cells into balance, that's going to make a difference for that microbiome. But now I know this xenobiotic, some of the people that are going to listen into that, maybe just to say a little bit more in depth about what is it that the xenobiotic really is doing. Because balance, if people say, okay, that's easy to understand, omega-6, omega-3 balance, getting your cells into balance, you're going to get your nutrients in, your toxins out. So I think that kind of speaks for itself of getting your cells that balance. But now the xenobiotic is a bit more complicated, I think, because, maybe because I'm thinking the intestinal system is more complicated. So what is xenobiotic in short kind of doing?
Well, in the same way that balance oil balances large parts of the rest of the body, xenobiotic balances the microbiome. Now you need, there's different ways of breaking down the different microbial species. One of the ways is by dividing them into gram-negative and gram-positive. That's a very early distinction that was developed by the Danish microbiologist Christian Gram. And he developed a stain which would stain some microbes and not others. And if they took the stain, they were gram-positive, but if it didn't, they were gram-negative. And it was subsequently found that this was actually reflecting a quite important division between bacteria which are coated in one kind of substance, it happens to be lipoteichoic acid, which takes the stain, and the gram-negative bacteria, which are coated in lipopolysaccharide, a waxy substance which does not. Now, a healthy gut will contain very large numbers of gram-positive bacteria, and very specifically, species that we think are healthy for us, which we call probiotics. So they include the well-known ones like lactobacilli and bifidobacteria, but others as well. The problem is that these bacterial species absolutely need to have prebiotic fiber to eat. That's what they live on. They're called saccharolytic. They like to chew up carbohydrates, specifically the carbohydrates of the type that we put into xenobiotic. If you don't eat enough of those, and the modern diet certainly does not contain enough of them, they start to die back. Their place is taken over by the gram-negative bacteria. And because they're coated with lipopolysaccharide, this causes huge amounts of inflammation. And if you have enough inflammation in the gut, it causes major problems there. But if it's bad enough, the cells that line the colon start to separate, and you get what some people call leaky gut. And these lipopolysaccharides and other macromolecules start to get into the bloodstream, And if you know your anatomy, the portal circulation drains the gastrointestinal tract, goes straight to the liver. And this is linked very closely to the kind of liver damage that we call non-alcohol related fatty liver disease. And that goes to something called NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. And that, in some cases, actually an increasing number of cases, will go on to hepatocellular carcinoma. So we have this terrible situation where the world is eating such a bad diet that 1 person in 4 all over the world has got this form of liver disease. It's really a slow motion disaster in the making. And the only way to put that right is not to go to the medical specialists who'll give you drugs. You've just got to make a very simple change to your diet. Put these prebiotic fibers back into the diet. Microbiota says, thank you. It goes back to normal, and everything else starts to relax and to go back to normal as well. So that's what is the essence of xenobiotic. And we've made it a little bit more adventurous in a sense, because what we've done is we've put together a very carefully calculated blend of these fibers. Now, they're both in xenobiotic, and they're also in Longe. They're there as well. They're all doing the same thing. And they're present in very carefully graded amounts. Now, for any scientists who are listening in, I'll just tell you very briefly that the proportions of the different fibers were calculated very carefully based on intestinal transit time, microbial fermentation rates, and the therapeutic margins of each of the fibers. So the smaller the fiber, the more quickly it ferments, and the less you can eat of it before it starts causing gastrointestinal distress. So it's been very carefully calculated to provide cover and to give you the switch from negative to positive through the entirety of the large intestine. Once you do that, the microbiome, instead of being hostile to you and damaging to your health prospects, becomes immensely supportive. And it's so closely associated to longer health expectancy and now longer life expectancy. If any of you are interested and you want to see the details and you want to see the original research, visit my blog, which is drpaulclayton.eu, and there's quite a lot of posts there which cite all of the papers that that are being currently generated all around the world.
So, Dr. Paul, if I understand it correctly, because I know you've said, get your body into balance, and then when we get the microbiome in balance, it's kind of like, it's like then your body can actually heal itself.
Absolutely,
And that's,
yes.
And then like in Xeno, we've added the vitamins and minerals that you have been formulating to kind of work as synergetically, like this orchestra of things. And you said this is what's going to be optimal so that your body can fix itself. Am I understanding it correctly? Just making sure.
That's absolutely right. I mean, when you look at the way in which people age in the developed societies today, as we get older, we become more at risk of chronic degenerative disease. What we now understand from studies of vestigial cultures like the Hadza in Africa or the Tsimane in Bolivia is that if you're living a better and a healthier lifestyle, as you get older, those things just don't happen. You do not become more vulnerable to heart attacks or cancer or dementia. It just doesn't happen. So what we're seeing here in our society is nothing to do with the fact we're getting older. It's to do with the fact that we're being chronically poisoned. And what we have been trying to do for many years now is to understand in more detail how it is that the modern diet poisons us. We've got to the point now where we can isolate 3 or 4 key mechanisms, and the health protocol is designed to rectify each one of those mechanisms. Once you do that, your body, instead of being at war with you, instead of failing and letting you down, then becomes your ally. And it's just amazing what it is capable of. We've been baked in the evolutionary furnaces for millennia, and the body has so much capacity to recover, to regenerate, to adapt, and to heal. We're starving it. If you're living on the SAD, the standard American diet, what I'm trying to do is to give the body what it needs in order to allow it to function at its best. And I think, many of you have heard of success stories with our customers and with our patients, where people who were very, very sick indeed, multiply pharmaceutically dependent, become eventually independent. They no longer require medications. I mean, I just heard 2 days ago of a case of someone who had I think, quite advanced atheroma in 2 coronary arteries, was going to go in for surgery for at least 2 stents. And before surgery, in the pre-op, they did a last scan, a last coronary artery angiogram to see where the blockages now were and how badly they were affected. And they brought this person around and said, you're not going into surgery, we're not going to operate. And the reason is you no longer have atheroma. You have the arteries of a 20-year-old. And by the way, the patient, I think, was in his early 60s. And I've heard so many stories like that. The body is capable of so much recovery if you give it what it needs to do so. Getting the microbiome into the right configuration is an important part of that.
So Dr. Paul, then just to say, you know, we're really, which gets me so excited. I know a lot of people I could see like going, wow, is what Zinzino's really doing with the health protocol. But we want to get the word out. I know many places around the world, you're speaking in so many countries all over talking about this. And you know, we are out talking to everybody we know, but the health professionals, we want, is there something we can do so that we're really getting the word out in a broader aspect, or are we just going to keep working one person at a time to get the word out?
We are working increasingly with doctors because they're actually seeing the results of our interventions in their patients, in their family members. And you know, I think that a lot of doctors, I was very critical of them earlier, and I said, well, you know, their hearts are in the right place, but their heads aren't. Many doctors, to give them credit, are intelligent people who want to look after their patients and give them the best kind of care that they can. In many places, they are hampered. They're not allowed to do or make recommendations or to prescribe anything that isn't a drug. And believe me, the medical profession has been corralled by the pharmaceutical industry and the regulators in order to achieve just that. It's a kind of, you know, the market has been fixed or cornered, if you like, by the drug companies. But once a doctor has seen 1, 2, or more of his or her patients recovering and rebounding in the way that we're now familiar with, many of them come on board. They get very enthusiastic. They become converts. And we now have doctors, large numbers of doctors actually, increasingly working with us in, I think, over 50 countries. So the word is getting out. They talk to each other. And they're very skeptical and conservative to begin with, and they should be. They should be. I absolutely approve of that. But once they see a couple of patients, even if they don't know very much about the theory, they look at the empirical evidence. They look at their own cases, their own family members getting better, and they put 2 and 2 together. They may see a second and a third, and then they think there's something here. And that kind of empirical knowledge, and we can then supply the theoretical underpinning to. Once they've got those 2 types of information, they get very, very happy. They start to work with us, and I welcome them.
I love that. And you know, as you've said before, the science is the science. We can't get around that. So when people are looking up Zinzino and really digging into it, they really see it's making a difference. The health protocol is definitely making a difference. Well, Dr. Paul, we did talk about living longer. We did talk about, you know, reducing that inflammation in the body. We talked about improving that microbiome. But one of the things that we started all of this with is people saying, I want to lose weight. And, you know, especially in North America, we are kind of known for the weight issue. Is this going to help them, or what can we do? You said it all ties together. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or what people can be doing really to get the weight off? We heard how many times you need to take off some pounds to start being healthier.
Well, you know, if you have a dog and you go to the vet, and that dog is overweight, the vet is almost always going to say to you that you have to get your dog back into shape, because a big pound overweight is going to take months, if not years, of its life expectancy. We know that in these animals. And the same is true for humans. We, the problems that you talk about in North America, but that's absolutely true, but it's a recent phenomenon. If you look at photographs of the Americans of a generation ago or 2 generations ago, they looked very different. Look at the footage of Woodstock, for example, and you will remark, it's remarkable how thin people were then and how much they've changed in a very short period of time. And that is the destructive impact of a totally out of control multinational food industry who've produced these ultra processed foods designed to circumvent our Stone Age taste buds and make us eat far more than we need to and make us terribly, terribly sick in the process. They've been grotesquely irresponsible. And the multinational food companies, I think, are guilty of murder on a truly epic scale. That's perhaps strong language, you might think, but I can back all this up. And if you go to my blog again, I'll show you chapter and verse. The idea of being overweight, yep, that is damaging in its own right because it contributes chronic inflammatory stress. It goes hand in hand with dysbiosis, and it puts you on the fast track to metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and then the long-term complications of diabetes. So it is something we'd like to do something about. How can you do that? Well, first of all, move away from ultra-processed foods. Stop eating them, no matter how delicious you find them. They've been engineered to be delicious, to overcome, the normal cues of satiety. But make a promise to yourself that you're simply not going to buy these things anymore and start learning how to cook with basic produce. Having said that, what we've done is to provide a tool that will help you to do that. If you're not eating very much, if you're eating 2,000 calories a day because you're a white-collar person, or you're in lockdown, or you're living in a city or a town, it's difficult to run at more than 2,000 calories a day. So if you're only going to eat 2,000 calories a day, make them count. They have to be nutrient dense. You can't afford very many empty calories. Lean Shake has been developed very much with that in mind. So this is a product that gives extraordinarily high quality of protein. In fact, so high that we don't need to add sugar, which most of these meal replacements or protein formulations require. And which means that you don't get the insulin surge, the glycemia, the insulin surge, and then start feeling hungry later on. But this product is also something that contains a sprinkling of vitamins and minerals, which complement Extend, by the way. But it also contains this same blend of prebiotic fibers that we have in Xenobiotic. The combination of all of these things is to give you really first-class nutrition. There isn't a single empty calorie in there at all, but in a form that will allow you to feel sated and less hungry for longer. So cut down on your calories, but not your nutrients. And at the same time, look after your microbiome. Lean Shake will do all of that.
Okay, so in that sense, because of the prebiotic fiber in it, and it doesn't have spiking and things, that's making it different than, a lot of the meal replacements that are on the market?
If you look at the meal replacements, and I've tried a lot of them because I'm always interested to see, what people are taking. A lot of them use a rather low grade of protein, which has off notes, and organoleptically, they don't taste particularly good. And so you have to add either a lot of flavorings or a lot of sweetener. Some of these protein drinks, some of the meal replacements have actually got quite a high glycemic index. There's a lot of sugar in there, which can be disguised. It could be, described in any number of words. There's, I think, about 50 words or terms the food industry can legally use to describe sugar. It might be hidden, for example, as apple concentrate, which is basically sugar. And I think that if you try those types of meal replacements or protein, high protein products, you find that in a very short period of time, you're feeling hungry again. And they're not very effective in helping you to take the weight off. And I think the reason is because they've been designed in a bit of a vacuum. If you give people protein or if you give people a meal replacement, you've got to look at all of the components of it. You have to take all of the different ingredients into consideration and think in a joined up way about the way in which all of these components will affect your appetite, your blood sugar, your energy levels, whether it'll give your body what it needs to repair and to rejuvenate and to rebuild. All of these things are important. And most formulations, they might get one or two of these things right, but they don't cover the full picture.
Okay, so even if people are losing weight, the health protocol, and would you substitute then the Lean Shake for the probiotic or the prebiotic, the Xenobiotic? Is that what you would do? So continue the health protocol and then have the meal replacements in there? Because Just
Well, the meal replacement is there if you want to lose weight, and you can use it, you can substitute it for a meal. If what you want to do is to stay the same weight or actually bulk up and grow more muscle, and some people do that, then it's something you can add to your regime. It's very high quality protein indeed, and it's easy to incorporate.
Okay, fantastic. There was another question on here. Cindy was asking if you know that you're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, would you still need the xenobiotic? Would you still need the Extend? Do you still need all that?
Probably yes. If you're talking about someone who's running on 2,000 kilocalories a day, even if you make a lot of smart food choices, you won't get enough of all the things that you need. We were designed to be physically considerably more active than we are now, probably about twice as active. And if you're running on 4,000 calories a day and you're eating unprocessed, basic, simple foods, you're almost certainly going to get almost everything that you need. It's very difficult to do that at 2,000 calories a day, even if you're making clever food choices. And most people don't, in my experience, know how to make all the right food choices. Eating lots of fruits and vegetables, great. That's really good. Good idea. And that will help you in terms of your phytonutrient intake. It won't do much for your fatty acid balance necessarily. And it won't necessarily give you the right prebiotics either, unless you're making some very careful choices. So fruits and vegetables, quite a lot of them will contain some of the short chain prebiotic fibers. They won't necessarily give you the longer chain ones, which you really, really need, because they're going to, in fact, do the heavy lifting in the descending colon, which is really where you need this, because that's one of the most vulnerable parts of the gut. 1,3,1,4 beta-glucans from oats are a really good source. So add oats to your other fruits and vegetables. And then the last of the fibers that we focus on are the resistant starches. And those you don't find in very many vegetables unless you process them in a certain way. But there are small amounts in a variety of fruits and vegetables. What we know is that simple starches can be made into resistant starches by a process called retrocrystallization. And that's what happens when you take a high starch food, such as a potato, and don't just cook it once, but cook it 2 or 3 times. Every time you cook the starch, and it goes through the heating and cooling cycle, it goes into this retrograde crystallization, and the starch becomes less digestible, so it's not going to put so much sugar into your bloodstream. It becomes more fermentable. It becomes a prebiotic fiber. And at that point, it's actually very, very nutritionally important. It's exactly the sort of thing that your microbiome wants.
Okay. So when we're talking about microbiome, there was a lot of questions on here, and I'm going to try to ask a few of them here. But somebody was talking about, like, our health protocol in the balance oil. It's who is, you take a certain amount per weight. Now with the xenobiotic, is there different issues that make a difference on how much you should take? Should you, is 1 scoop enough for everybody? Should everybody be taking 2 scoops a day? And you can see a lot of the comments are about, and this might add up to be a whole bunch of questions, but if people have gluten issues or, other issues in regards to constipation and things like that, how does the xenobiotic help all of this? Should we, if we're taking 2 scoops a day, we ever have everybody, are we really going to get that effect by it? Okay, that was a whole bunch, Dr. Paul. I'm going to let you try to work that out. Sorry about that.
Different people probably do need slightly different doses, but it doesn't tend to be a body weight issue at all. Some people are able to tolerate more than others. For some people, just taking half a scoop is going to cause a gastrointestinal upset. You see, even if you've started off with a really unhealthy microbiome, it may be really unhealthy, but it's a kind of a system where the bugs are all sort of used to each other. It's an unhappy situation, an unhealthy one, but it is relatively stable, even if in the long term it's going to cause you a lot of damage. Once you introduce the prebiotic fibers into your diet and the gram-positive probiotic species start to grow, gram-negative bacteria don't like that. The gram-positive species are starting to produce bacteriocins, again, for the chemists, best known of these is niacin, but there's many others, which are actually designed to help them to fight their corner in the gut, not that there's any corners in the gut, and diminish the numbers of the harmful gram-negative species, such as the Bacteroides. And then the situation becomes less inflammatory and everything starts to become a healthier configuration. But as you're changing from the old status quo and you're moving towards a new steady state, for some people, that process can be a bit disturbing. They might have diarrhea, they might have cramps. So for some people, you need to take it slowly, start off with a quarter scoop, build up to a half, build up to a 3/4, and so on and so forth. And I think probably about 2 scoops a day is about optimal for most people. I don't think most people need more than that. But some people won't ever get there because they've started off with such an unhealthy microbiomal configuration. Other people will go there straight away. I started on 2 scoops a day and I didn't have any problems with it at all. So it really is just a question of finding out what you're comfortable with.
I love that. Okay, well, Dr. Paul, we have had so much fantastic information here. And I know a lot of people are asking questions in regards to certain disease names or things like that. But Dr. Paul, if we're just going to tie it all together, you know, when you have people saying, what about this? What about this? What can we do with this? Actually, number one is really just the health protocol. That's what you designed it for, so that the body can work optimally to really battle everything itself. So getting your body completely into balance with one of the balanced products, doesn't matter which one, just grabbing one and using that. And then getting your right vitamins and minerals in the body, you know, that's why you created that Extend. And then how important the microbiome is. And when people take that time, it's going to make a difference in quite a bit of percentage of people. Wouldn't you say?
Oh,
Are we
absolutely.
seeing so many?
Well, the people feel different. There's no doubt about it. They feel better. And our little Zinzino community, I think we're now coming up towards 500,000 strong. I mean, we're growing very rapidly now. And if you look at the health characteristics of this community, it's quite extraordinary. So much so that we're being seen as a kind of a blue zone. So the biobanking community at the University of Uppsala and 1 or 2 other places is looking at the Zinzino population and thinking, this is a really odd bunch of people. They don't seem to get sick at the normal rate. They seem to stay alarmingly healthy for longer than anybody else we've come across, except perhaps for the monks at the monastery of Mount Athos in Greece, or the Japanese at Okinawa, or the Seventh-day Adventists at Loma Linda. So we have created a kind of a blue zone, all of our own. I'll give you another example. With this COVID nonsense that's going on at the moment, we know that probably 150,000 Zinzino people have had COVID. And we've been looking through all the records that we can. There does not appear to have been a single death, and as far as I know, not a single hospitalization. If the body has what it needs and your immune systems, including the innate immune system, that's very important, are working properly, you'll head off the virus at the pass within 8, 9, 10 days, long before it has a chance to settle in, involve the adaptive immune system, and then you get into this risk area where you might develop ARDS or a cytokine storm. But if your innate immune system is working well, you will never get to that point. And that seems to be what we're seeing in the Zinzino blue zone.
Well, so I have to say, I started, you know, personally, because it made such a difference in my son, but I feel the same way. I mean, we have a lot of our high school friends and family from where I went, and coming back to any class reunion or meeting people. I've done this for 10 years and I honestly feel 10 years younger. And being grandma of 2, it's like, we see a lot of people saying we're turning back the time. So we're feeling younger. We're not getting sick. You know, that microbiome is making that difference with our health protocol. And weight, we've seen so many people lose the weight, which is actually getting them healthy. So it's kind of, you know, either spiraling out of control or you're actually coming back into control. And to me, the health protocol isn't just about getting, when you're healthy, it's actually the best anti-aging on the market at the same time, Dr. Paul. We all want to thank you for that.
Well, if you can protect people from the so-called diseases of civilization, if you're increasing their health span, the increase in lifespan comes along with it. That wasn't our primary target, but it's a corollary to what we're doing. I occasionally run into people I was at school with, and when I look at them, I think, you got old, really old. Quite a lot of them. A lot of them are dead. I tend not to run into the dead ones, but quite a lot of them have died. And when they see me, they say, well, "What happened to you? You haven't changed since we last saw you." I mean, if I saw them 20 years ago, I haven't changed very much. And I'm not saying that we've stopped the aging process. Absolutely not. We're all born with one foot in the grave, as they say. And what I'm saying is, I think that there are different rates of aging, and you can see that in your friends and acquaintances. And with these tools, we can move you from the faster road to aging onto a slower road, not just physically, but I think psychologically too. So many of the psychological and emotional aspects of aging are actually to do with physical and biochemical changes that are taking place in the brain, which are affected by your nutrition, by your microbiome. And if you look after those basics, then it seems to me, this is my experience at any rate, that it's not just the physical, but it's the emotional aspects of aging that we see so often in older people, more of a rigidity of thought. They seem to become less important. I'll just finish, if I may, with one story. It's very, very clear that the neurodegenerative diseases, as we're talking about the brain, like Alzheimer's and Parkinsonism, are very much diseases of civilization. Of course, they were known before 1950, they were known before 1900, but they occurred at far lower levels than we see them occurring today. So they are undoubtedly affected by our diet and lifestyle. There's one patient of mine who is a forensic accountant. And for those of you who don't know what that is, you just pray if you've ever done anything wrong and the IRS sends their law dogs after that you don't have an analytical accountant as part of that pack, because they will tear you apart. Anyway, he's getting on a bit, and some of you will know, anyone who reads my blog, I think 4 or 5 years ago, he was diagnosed by a very eminent neurologist as having Parkinsonism. He very clearly did. And he had the great good sense to come and talk to me about it, and I put him on the health protocol, nothing very special. And he went back for a follow-up, I think 18, maybe 24 months ago. And at that point, the neurologist said, I am beginning to wonder if I made the right diagnosis. Let's look at you a little bit more carefully. And after a long, long screening, I said, okay, I thought maybe for a while I got it wrong, but I see it. I was right. Of course, doctors love saying that. Because he failed the spiral test. And for those of you who know, this consists of, there's a spiral on a piece of paper or on the screen, and you have to trace it. And if you have Parkinsonism, that becomes really difficult. And so my friend, he seems my friend as well now, didn't do that well on that spiral test. And the doctor was delighted to be able to confirm his initial diagnosis. Said, well, you're doing really well. You seem to be stable. I don't know what you're doing, but keep on doing what you're doing, and I hope it stays this way. Walter kept on doing what he was doing, and then I think 2 months ago now went back for a third follow-up, and he now performed perfectly on the spiral test. He doesn't even have micrographia anymore. That's another sign of Parkinson. Your handwriting gets smaller and smaller. And the consultant said, I was wrong after all. I owe you an apology. I've cast this appalling blight over you, which you've suffered under for the last 5 years, not knowing that Walter was perfectly, it wasn't blighted at all, because I'd given him, I think, the hope that maybe we could do something about it. But I think now you don't have Parkinsonism at all. And Walter then said, well, it's because I followed this diet, this particular diet. And the neurologist, who I'm afraid was terribly hidebound, or very conservative, and because his thinking was very much embedded in the pharmaceutical model, said, okay, well, I don't think you had Parkinsonism. I think it was easier for the consultant to say, I made a mistake, rather than to say, well, there may be something here, which is very symptomatic of the malaise of the medical profession in its current form. But Walter is now being called out of retirement. He's now 84 or 85, to actually clear up the messes that are made by the millennial accountants, forensic accountants who took his place. Now, it's not just me who's finding this stuff out. If you look up the work of Dale Bredesen, B-R-E-D-E-S-O-N, Dale Bredesen, he's at UCLA. He's published 2 papers now showing that in people with Alzheimer's, if you catch them early enough, and I was able to catch Walter very early, you can get a reversal, a normalization. If you're being poisoned, once the symptoms first emerge, if you put it right, the body has enormous powers of recovery and rejuvenation of repair. If it's gone on for too long, there's not much we can do. But if you can get into it early and restore the factory settings, it's just amazing what the body and brain are capable of.
Wow, Dr. Paul, with that is incredible. In the 10 years I've been working with Enzino, I think the stories are amazing. But one thing I think that moves me even more, that we're working with a company that I'm almost looking more, the stories that we won't be hearing because we have been putting people in balance and working with that health protocol. So we're going to stay away from a lot of these diseases of civilization, and it's making a difference. Dr. Paul, just the formulations that you've done with this health protocol and the work we're doing, creating this blue zone, we are really making a difference. And we're looking for more people that are working with us, including all of those fantastic health professionals out there who are wanting to really make a dent in people's health and doing so much better. Dr. Paul, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule also to be here. Do you have any last words you just want to say to everybody that was listening in today in regards to any of this?
Well, we're up at about 4, maybe 500,000 now, but the reality is, it might sound impressive, but it's just a drop in the ocean. There are so many people out there who are getting sick prematurely, who are aging far too rapidly, and who are dying far before their time. And there are times when I can't sleep at night. I'm so aware of this. And for me, whatever we've achieved at Enzino so far, it's not enough. It's just a tiny, tiny beginning of things. But I want to change the entire model of healthcare. And I'm very grateful to the Enzino family for helping to make this possible. We have a long way to go, but we've made a fantastic start. I
love that, Dr. Paul. I am going to allow people to unmute themselves and say thank you so much for this, such an informative